What is going on, guys? It's Yoji. If you're having trouble gearing your character for endgame mapping, dried lake farming, or even merciless Dominus, this video guide might help you out. I removed all the gear I used and acquired while leveling from my level 65 Righteous Fire Templar. This way I can show you how I gear my character for maps from the ground up, explain my thought process behind choosing items to buy, and which stats I prioritize for what reason. I will set myself on a 30 chaos budget for this, which is a little more than half an exalt in hardcore talisman at the moment. The second rule is no haggling. I will only buy items for the buyout price listed, so this should be very easy for you to replicate. I know gearing can be very different for each character and each build, but I believe this might still help you a great deal when it comes to finding out what type of gear your build needs and then buying that gear for your character. It is important to know exactly what stats you need and which thresholds you want to meet before you go and start buying items. So for my character, for mapping and dried lake farming, I want the following goals met. Capped elemental resistances in merciless at 75% each. Specifically for this character, it is a Righteous Fire character, which will need 87% fire resistance to be capped and sustain the damage he takes from Righteous Fire. For that I will run the aura Purity of Fire, as well as use the unique shield Rise of the Phoenix to increase my resistance cap. So the next step is identify uniques and items your build requires, which for me is Rise of the Phoenix. Next up on my priority list is being able to use all my skill gems. I have enough strength to use all the red gems, but Firestorm requires more intelligence than my character currently has, so getting that extra intelligence has a high priority. I also want my character to have around 4000 life when I finish gearing up, so trying to get as much life as possible on every piece of gear is definitely something I will look out for. I also want a 5 link to up my damage significantly. My character will be using the Iron Will support gem. That means strength will grant me 2% extra spell damage, as well as plus 5 max life per 10 strength. So if some of the life we get on gear comes from a high strength roll, that means we also gain some extra spell damage. Next, I'd like my character to have around 5000 armor, to be able to mitigate physical damage better. Around 0% chaos resistance in merciless would be really nice to have. And some lower priority things for now are rolls that help with flask management, high movement speed on boots, and overcapped resist to help with curses like elemental weakness. But that only really gets important for higher maps. So now that this list is set, time to gear up. So let's start off with buying the mandatory uniques. On a Rise of the Phoenix you want as low energy shield as possible, as having ES increases the damage you take from Righteous Fire. High fire resistance is a bonus. Make sure to check the roll ranges of the unique items you want to buy. Sometimes you can get really good ones for cheap. We can get one with minimum ES for 5 chaos here. Next up, we will get ourselves a 5-link chest piece. As I barely ever play armor characters, I have no clue which bases are good or even usable for my level. So I went to look it up on the PoE wiki. After checking prices of rare and non-rare chests, I decided that a Crusader plate would be a good compromise between low price and a solid armor base. A white Crusader plate is 3 chaos. As we won't use a white piece of armor, we will have to quality it up and alch it. And then maybe use a few chaos orbs to get a decent chest. We are not going for GG here, just a good life roll and maybe some armor or resist to go with it. We don't want to spend too much chaos here. So let's alch it. Boop! That's pretty much all we need. We can even craft a resist on this if we need it, or increased armor if we end up not needing the resist. But we do not do this now, as we want to stay flexible with what to craft on the item for as long as possible. It is good to know our crafting options though. Next up, we will buy the helmet. Usually which attributes can roll on a piece of gear is decided by the type of defenses they grant. There are some exceptions though. One is, a helmet can always roll intelligence. If you want to know exactly what stats can roll on which piece of gear and how high the rolls can be, check out poetrade, link in the video description. So for a helmet we want an armor only piece, with intelligence, a high life roll and at least 2 elemental resistances. Usually we would also look out for a strength roll, as we are planning to use Iron Will, but 2 resistances and an intelligence roll fill up all 3 suffixes, so we cannot get strength on top of that. This helmet up here has a high tier 1 life roll and really high armor, but the resist rolls could be better, and the intelligence roll is barely high enough. And as we level up our gems, it would probably not be enough to maintain the int requirements. So instead we get this one here. It also has a tier 1 life roll, but 2 tier 2 resists as well, and an open prefix to craft armor on it, which means the armor will not end up being as low as it now seems. All the other prefixes we could craft are not useful for us. And we get this helmet for 1.5 chaos. Now let's get some gloves. We want from gloves pretty much the same we want from a helmet. Life, armor, resists, maybe some strength. Nothing else that can roll on gloves really helps out a spellcaster. But if you are an attack build, for example, you can get attack speed here. Alright, so let's be a bit more specific with resistances this time, as we need some cold and lightning resistance. Sometimes putting in minimum values for the rolls helps to narrow down the results a bit. But if you overshoot like I did here, you might end up with items way above your budget. These gloves here with a tier 1 life roll and a tier 2 cold res roll, going with a mid tier lightning resist, are very cheap at 2 chaos. Especially considering the tier 1 accuracy roll, which sadly will not benefit us. The gloves do have an open prefix though, to craft some armor on it. Alright, my feet are getting cold, so let's get us some boots. Again, life, strength, armor and resistances is what we want to see. But on boots, movement speed is a must, if your character does not have a spammable movement skill like whirling blades for example. In this case I usually try to get at least 20% increased movement speed. Well, turns out double res life movement speed boots are really expensive. So we drop one resistance roll to be able to stay within our budget. The first 2 pairs are really nice for their price. The second one has higher resist and life. The first one has a higher strength roll and more armor on it. But both can either have armor or a resist crafted on them. I end up buying the higher armor, higher strength one, as I believe we won't have many problems capping resists either way. But both pairs of boots would have been a fine choice. And that's just for 1 chaos. One mistake I made here that you can learn from is I did not pay attention to the level requirement. I cannot yet equip these boots. Instead I will have to grind out 3 more levels before I will be able to use them. Which is not really a problem but slightly annoying. For an amulet, I want to use an Avian Twins talisman, which converts 50% of lightning damage taken into fire damage. Because I will have very high fire resistance, this helps me mitigate a lot of lightning damage. Also, I just kinda wanna try it out. Sadly, all the people selling good ones are not responding or AFK, so I will have to live with this 6 fuse talisman as a band-aid for now. But I will look to upgrade it when I can. Okay, it's time for another resist check. We need 16 more fire resistance and 16 more lightning resistance to cap those out. As well as 8 cold resistance after we can put our boots on, which is 3 levels later. Armor is sitting around 3.2k, but that's without having qualityed up all our gear. Plus we can still craft a resist or armor on both our chest piece and our boots. So let's keep that in mind as well. Okay, let's buy us some shiny rings. I tend to buy rings later in the gearing process as they are usually quite expensive. Also, having your resistances almost sorted while buying rings makes it a lot easier to get some of the other good stats the ring slot has to offer. I would really like this gold ring with 16 all res and a tier 1 life roll, as it would already cap all my resists. But the seller of this one and lots of others turned out to be not responding. So I went to buy this high strength, high life 2-stone ring. That means I will craft lightning resistance on my boots and we are resistance capped. Having capped resistances allows us to craft armor on our chest piece, which is a great boost to our survivability. It also makes it so we can try to get some cast speed, fire damage or chaos resistance on the second ring, as elemental resistances are not much of a concern anymore. This will make it way easier to stay on budget. Sadly, the high life, high cast speed rings are all energy shield based, and energy shield increases the damage taken from righteous fire, so they are kind of not really an option. The fire damage rings were way too expensive. So instead I settled with this ring with a tier 1 chaos resistance roll that is cheap because it was corrupted. With another 4 chaos spent, we got 8 chaos left to spend on the belt and weapon. That means the belt has to be really cheap, but as we do not need any resistances, we might be able to get a high life and armor or high life and flask affix belt for cheap. I decided the flask roll would be more useful than armor as it provides my flasks with an additional use. I sorted the belts by life and the first 2 140 plus life belts were a bit too pricey. But I spotted this 139 life belt with 15% reduced flask charges used for only 15 alterations, which is around a chaos worth of currency. That sounds like a deal. That means we get to spend a whopping 7 chaos on a weapon. Well, all we really look for here is high fire, elemental or spell damage, for which we use the fire spell damage search option on poetrade. And also some cast speed to make our character feel a little bit more responsive. I sort by highest fire spell damage and go through. I spot this wand for exactly 7 chaos, with 100% increased fire spell damage and some cast speed. It also has added cold damage to spells, which is a nice bonus. So I buy it, only to realize my character does not have the int requirements that he would need to wear this wand. Don't make that mistake yourself. Luckily, by using the same method, I managed to find an only slightly worse scepter for 7 chaos that I can actually use. And with that, we are fully geared. This is what the finished character and his stats look like. That is, without the upgraded boots. But those will come on in 3 levels. Now I need to link and color all the sockets, quality everything up, and I am good to go probably until tier 8 or even tier 10 maps in hardcore. Maybe with making a few minor upgrades to our crappy rings and Amulet. I hope this was useful to you. If it was, subscribe or check out my channel for more Path of Exile content. I am Yoji, and I will see you soon.